On a brief non-table note, this is the furnace that we have in the garage, and it was at least secondhand when we got it, so I suppose that makes it at least third-hand now. The stamp inside is from 1978, and it's got a few miles on it, but it works pretty well now that we did some troubleshooting and got it running, so that's very helpful on the temperature in the garage. Unfortunately, and there's always a caveat, we had my multimeter in line with the flame rod to troubleshoot it and see how much current was going through, and it ended up running the igniter through it. So it was more than an eighth of an inch, maybe a sixth. If we use 3 million volts per meter, that's a little under 13,000 volts that ran through this thing. And it wasn't on the voltage protected end, it was on the sensitive current terminals, which are 400 milliamps max, and even the voltage one is 1,000 max. So in any case, we enabled a special Easter egg on this thing now. The Fluke 87 has hieroglyphics mode, where it lights up all over the place, and unfortunately I can't read those. So I couldn't find anyone online who'd had this problem before. It appears if you fry the fusible resistors, it just reads no load, and you still get sensible things otherwise. So if anyone has any info on this, I would appreciate it, because it's a fairly expensive meter and it worked great. I'd love to have it back. I'm going to reverse course a little bit on the star strategy here. When I was talking about shifting these lifting levers out to the frame, I still think that that would be a good thing. It would give us some benefits. But what I had neglected is that once we added this centerpiece, and we actually went ahead and built it, the mushroom part that I talked about, we'll do a little close-up shot here where we're just showing how it works and giving it a rotation. When you drop that in the center, you leave only a small room on the outside, and we need to be able to have at least two of these linear guides which ride on the center shaft here. Now I was thinking about shifting the center shaft out to the sides, and we just run out of room to put that in there. You can't put it out here for various reasons. Things underneath would bump into it. I showed how close some of the tolerances are in the previous video. So I went back and I said, all right, are the disadvantages that I had identified for this, are they truly accurate, and what makes them disadvantages? So one thing was that I realized the whole friction deal on here on the star probably isn't as bad. I mean, it is not as bad as I had in my mind. I was kind of fired up to do this new strategy. And if you look, there's no digging in, aside from a few scratches before I rounded them off. And I've opened and closed this table a few times, so that doesn't seem like much of a problem. It clearly works. I've run it back and forth plenty of times with this strategy. So what we want to do in that case is add adjustability, which is what we were trying to add with the other one, because it does need that, and come in here and trim this up and make it real nice and smooth. I had jigsawed it before. We're going to do it with a router now. Make it extra circular, really round it over nice. And I think this will serve our purposes with that adjustability. Some of these, the extra play that we had with these were because I was trying to figure it out. So that could be cleaned up too, if necessary. As I said, this inside circle is still on its sort of first revision and not particularly elegant. I cut it out with a jigsaw, and I don't even remember how I rounded over the edge. It was probably a combination of chisel and rasp or something like that. There's a few marks from use here with it being dark, but that's about it. So what we're going to do to make it nice and round is to cut out a circle, and then we cut on the inside here using the same strategy we did as on the cradle project. Then we're going to drop that ring in and tack it down with a few 18 gauge nails, short ones, and use the top bearing flush trim bit to run around there and just trim off a little bit and clean that up and get it perfectly circular. With that complete, I picked up a new 1/4 inch round over bit and ran that around a nice smooth pattern on the inside. Gave it great results. Much more consistent than it was before. It's not hard to improve upon a rasp and a chisel. With that fresh cutter, it takes just the smallest amount of sanding around there and all the splinters are gone. Nice and smooth. Next up are the actual arms themselves. We want to replace these because there's a clean piece of aluminum in the center there for reference, and you can see that These used to be old baking pans, and we used them for mixing epoxy before we repurposed it into this. Here's a few extra ones ready to meet their fate sitting by the forge. So we found some old trailer ramps, which are made out of pretty heavy-duty aluminum, in the shed, and we're going to cut off one link and use that as our stock to make new ones. So they'll all be exactly the same size and nice and clean. These are held together only by the bottom rail, so we're just going to hacksaw through that to separate off one link. That's more than enough material for what we need. Now you may be wondering why I decided to go with aluminum here when I used steel for the arms, which actually attach to the center. And really you could use either material in either case, but aluminum is a bit friendlier in my experience. I don't think I've ever gotten an aluminum splinter, whereas I've gotten steel splinters, and those are pretty unpleasant, quite a bit more than wood ones. And I also didn't have an aluminum sheet which was large enough to make the arms. Now, after much cutting, we're finally down to some essentially flat stock, so we trace out our pattern and cut them out with the jigsaw again. Since aluminum is so soft, you don't want to use a grinding wheel on it, so I just use a flap disc, and we knocked all the edges off and got everything cleaned up. We also polished off the surface, which was kind of nice. The hinges didn't have any issues, so we're going to reuse the original ones. We mount them here with sheet metal screws and then cut off the excess with an angle grinder. In order to make it adjustable, we changed the base that hinge mounts to, so we're just cutting a few slots with the table saw here. The 2x4 is helping me guide it in since it won't sit flat on its own. And then you can see the slots here, we run the screws in, and that way we can just back off the screw and slide it in or out. Very easy to adjust. We dropped them into the center of the table and just got a feel for them. I knew the length was pretty close based on the previous one, but it always needs some adjustment. And then here we needed to be able to slide in a little further, so we trimmed off the block that holds that center bearing using just a oscillating trimmer tool. The part of the arm that rides against the star does so at a variety of angles as it lifts up, so we round off this edge by hand to make sure it's smooth all the way over. A single screw at first gives us a little rotational freedom to make sure it's lined up perpendicular to the center, or in line with it, whatever you want to call it. And get that adjusted, drop the second screw in, and then put the star on and just eyeball it from the side and get everything lined up. The table upgrades are complete. Let's take it for a test drive. With these upgrades complete, our next task is to get the plans updated. All the changes that we've made in here, I've kept a running list of so that I don't forget. Some of them are kind of buried underneath and be easy to overlook. And questions, minor clarifications, a couple typos that people have sent me over the past year are also, I have a list of those, are going to be rolled into the plans update, which will come out next week. So that's my next task. And thank you for watching this series. I appreciate it. We're going to get those updated and get them sent out to all the previous customers. Thank you.